I found the floor plan on a Thursday evening. At first, I thought it was just another contractor document, a boring stack of numbers, measurements, room dimensions, electrical notes, and signatures. Then I saw the name written across the top, Margaret's Suite. I read it once, then again, and suddenly I couldn't hear the television anymore. I couldn't hear the dishwasher running in the kitchen. I couldn't even hear my husband moving around upstairs. All I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat. Because the house on that plan was my house. The land was mine. The savings used to purchase it were mine. And according to the documents in front of me, my husband had authorized a $96,000 addition that nobody had ever discussed with me. A separate entrance, a private bathroom, a kitchenette, a separate heating and cooling system, and a bedroom large enough to be considered a permanent residence. It wasn't a guest room. It wasn't a renovation. It wasn't an innocent misunderstanding. Someone was building my mother-in-law a home inside my home, and my husband had signed the papers behind my back. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 48 years old. For most of my life, I believed that being responsible was the same thing as being safe. I worked hard. I saved money. I paid bills early. I kept emergency savings. And when my husband, Ethan, told me we were building our dream house, I believed him. The property was 12 acres outside Asheville, North Carolina. Beautiful land, tall trees, a creek that ran behind the property, a long driveway, and a hill that faced west, so the sunset poured orange light across the entire field every evening. I had dreamed about that place for years. I found the property when I was 39. At the time, I was working as a nurse manager at a hospital. I picked up extra shifts, I worked holidays, I took overtime whenever it was available. I drove an old sedan for nearly 9 years. I skipped expensive vacations. I didn't care. I wanted that land. I bought the first 3 acres with savings. 2 years later, I bought another 2, then 3 more, then the final 4. It took 8 years. 8 years of saving. 8 years of sacrificing. 8 years of telling myself that one day I would wake up and hear nothing but birds outside my bedroom window. The deeds were in my name, every single one. Ethan knew that. He had never objected. In fact, he used to joke about it. "Claire owns the kingdom," he would say. "One day you're going to charge me rent." I would laugh, because I trusted him. That was before I discovered Margaret's Suite. Margaret was Ethan's mother. She wasn't the kind of woman who screamed. That almost made her worse. She smiled. She lowered her voice. She made little comments that could always be explained away as jokes. "You work so much, Claire, Ethan must get lonely." Or, "Ethan has always been much happier with a woman who understands what a man needs." Or, "Of course, this is your house too. I just think families should help each other." I used to ignore it. Whenever I told Ethan that something Margaret said bothered me, he would sigh. "She's old-fashioned. That's just how she talks. You're taking it personally. You've got to stop being so sensitive." Sensitive. That word became a convenient way to erase every boundary I tried to establish. But I had learned to live around Margaret. At least I thought I had. Then we started building the house. We had been working with an architect for nearly 2 years. The design was simple: 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a large kitchen, a covered porch, an office home, and a guest room near the back of the house. Nothing extravagant. We weren't trying to build a mansion. We were building a place where we could grow old. Ethan handled some of the construction details because of his background in commercial contracting. I handled the finances. That arrangement had always made sense. He understood construction, I understood money. And because the land was mine, I wanted to be involved in every decision concerning the property. Or so I thought. The night I found the floor plan, Ethan had told me he would be home late. There had been a problem at one of his job sites, so I went into his office looking for a plumbing invoice. I found it immediately. Then I saw the folder underneath it. The folder was thick, cream-colored, bent slightly on one corner. I opened it without thinking, and there it was, a revised floor plan. I looked at the layout. The main house was exactly what I remembered. Then I noticed an extension at the rear. I leaned closer. There was a separate hallway, a second entrance, a kitchenette, a full bathroom, a walk-in closet, and across the top of the page in bold letters, Margaret's Suite. I thought it had to be an old drawing. Then I saw the date, 2 weeks earlier, and underneath it, approved Ethan Bennett. His signature was there. I sat down. The estimated cost was $96,400. I stared at that number. $96,400 for a room I had never agreed to build. I opened the second document, construction change order. The addition was being funded through the construction loan. I opened the third, a request for a payment of $42,000, already approved, already scheduled. I felt a cold sensation move through my body. I wasn't angry yet. I was confused. I walked downstairs. I poured a glass of water. Then I stood in the kitchen and looked around. The walls weren't ours yet. The cabinets hadn't even been installed. We were still renting the little house across town while construction continued. The whole dream suddenly looked different, because apparently, while I was imagining our future, Ethan had already given part of it away. I didn't call him. I didn't call Margaret. Instead, I called the bank the next morning. My loan officer, Jenna, answered. "Claire, how are you? I need to ask you something." She immediately noticed my tone. "What happened? Was there a recent change order submitted against our construction loan?" There was a pause. "I'll pull up the file." I waited. Keyboard clicks. More typing. Then silence. "Yes." "How much?" $42,000 was requested initially. "Was it approved?" "Yes." "Who authorized it?" She hesitated. "Ethan is listed as an authorized borrower representative." I closed my eyes. "Does that mean he can change the construction plans?" Another pause. "Not without meeting the conditions of the construction agreement." "What conditions?" "I don't want to give you incorrect information. You should speak with your attorney." My stomach tightened. "Jenna, I am the property owner." "I understand. Is my signature on the change order?" "No." Those 2 words were enough. "No." "No, we have Ethan's signature." I looked out the window. The rain had started. "Jenna, has any money actually been released?" Her voice became more careful. "Yes." "How much?" $42,000. I sat down. Someone had taken $42,000 from a construction loan secured by my property, and I hadn't even known. I thanked her. Then I asked one final question. "Can you stop any future payments?" "I can place a note on the account, but for a formal hold, you'll need to submit documentation." "I'll have it today." I hung up. Then I opened my laptop and started taking screenshots. That afternoon, I visited the construction site alone. The house was still surrounded by scaffolding. Wood framing covered what would eventually become our walls. I walked around the back, and there it was, the addition. It already had a foundation. The exterior walls had begun to rise. For several seconds, I just stood there. I felt something I had never felt before. It was as though I had walked into a house that belonged to someone else. The builder, Calvin, saw me. "Claire?" "Hi." He looked nervous. I asked, "What is this?" He glanced at the structure. "Your husband said you knew." I didn't. His face changed. "Okay. Who ordered it?" "Ethan." "When?" "About a month ago." "A month?" "Maybe 5 weeks." "Who designed it?" He hesitated. "Your husband's mother had some requests." "Margaret?" He nodded. "What kind of requests?" "She wanted a larger bathroom." I stared at him. "She?" Calvin looked uncomfortable. "She attended a couple of planning meetings." "How many?" "I don't remember." "I do." He looked at me. 4. I froze. 4? She came here 4 times. Why? She was selecting fixtures. I felt sick. Fixtures? Countertops, tile, cabinet color, bathroom hardware. I looked at the half-built structure. My mother-in-law had been choosing the finishes of an apartment in my house, and I hadn't even known it existed. I drove to my lawyer's office that afternoon. Her name was Naomi Reyes. She had handled the final land purchase years earlier. Naomi was not the kind of attorney who talked just to fill silence. She looked at the documents. Then she looked at me. "Did you authorize this?" "No." "Did you know about it?" "No." "Is the land in your name?" "Yes." "Did you sign any amendment to the construction agreement?" "No." She leaned back. "Then we have a problem." "With my husband?" "With several people." She pointed to the plan. "Your husband may have had authority to manage certain contractor communications. That doesn't automatically give him authority to redesign the property." "What about Margaret?" "She has no ownership interest." "Could she claim residency?" "Not unless there's a legally enforceable agreement granting her that right." I looked at her. "How do we know whether there is one?" Naomi looked at me. "That's the question." "What do you mean?" "We need to find out whether your husband signed anything else." I suddenly remembered the folder. There had been more papers. I hadn't looked through all of them. Naomi continued. "Check every document. Deeds, contractor agreements, loan modifications, insurance, anything concerning occupancy." "What happens if he created an agreement giving his mother permanent rights?" Naomi answered calmly. "Then we challenge it." I nodded. "Can I stop construction?" "Yes." "Today?" "Today." She drafted a formal notice. No work on the addition, no further draws, no changes to the property without my written authorization, and no occupancy agreements could be executed without my consent. I signed. Then I went home. That evening, Ethan came through the door at 7:28. He looked tired. He kissed my cheek. "Hey." I said nothing. He put down his keys. "What's wrong?" I placed the construction documents on the table. "What is Margaret's suite?" The color drained from his face. For several seconds, he didn't move. Then he said, "It's not what you think." I almost laughed. What exactly am I supposed to think? "It's just a guest suite." "With a private entrance?" "She'll need privacy." "With a kitchenette?" "She's getting older." "She's 64. That doesn't mean she's young." "With her own HVAC?" He rubbed his forehead. "Claire, this is not a big deal." I stood up. $96,000 isn't a big deal? It's an investment in the family. My family didn't approve it. Our family. I looked directly at him. "Whose money?" He didn't answer. Whose land? Silence. Whose name is on the deed? He looked away. I knew then. He knew exactly what he had done. I asked, "Why didn't you tell me?" He said, "Because I knew you'd say no." There it was, the truth. Not a misunderstanding, not a surprise, not a generous gesture. A decision made in secret because he already knew I would refuse. I sat down. How long has this been planned? He rubbed his hands together. About 6 months. I stared at him. 6 months? Margaret needs somewhere to live. She has a house. She hates being alone. She has friends. She wants family close. And you decided that meant she should live in my house. Our house. I stood. Stop saying that. He looked shocked. Why? Because you keep using the word our whenever you want something that belongs to me. He didn't respond. I pointed toward the documents. $42,000 has already been released. I was going to put it back. With what? Business income. Your company is struggling. His eyes narrowed. Who told you that? You did. No, I didn't. You told me last month that you were short on cash flow. That's temporary. So is this. He stared at me. Then I said, "Is my money paying for your mother's apartment?" He didn't answer, and I already knew. The next morning, I called the bank again. Jenna sounded worried. I reviewed the file after our conversation yesterday. And there are additional documents. My chest tightened. What documents? I'd rather not discuss them over the phone. Jenna, come in. I drove there immediately. Jenna brought me into a conference room. She put a folder on the table. There were 2 additional draw requests. I opened the first, $18,700. The second, $11,900. My hands shook. Where did these go? Contractor payments. Related to the addition? Yes. I looked at her. Anything else? She nodded slowly. There is an issue I think you need to understand. She opened another page. The construction loan was more complicated than I had realized. Ethan had personally guaranteed part of it, but the property itself remained in my name. That meant the bank's risk was tied heavily to the value of my property. Why does this matter? Because if the loan goes into default, your property becomes part of the recovery calculation. I stared at her. So he is risking my land. Potentially, yes. I leaned back. For the first time, I wasn't simply angry. I was terrified. Because I had spent 8 years buying those 12 acres. And my husband was using my home as collateral for problems I didn't create. I asked, how much does he owe outside this loan? Jenna looked uncomfortable. I can't discuss accounts outside your authorization. Then what can you tell me? She glanced at the file. The bank has concerns regarding his overall financial position. That was enough. I thanked her. Then I called Naomi. That afternoon, Naomi requested Ethan's business financials. 2 days later, we had them. His company was in much worse condition than he had admitted. Outstanding loans, unpaid vendor balances, equipment financing, a tax dispute, and a line of credit that was almost completely used. But the biggest problem was something else. Margaret's suite was not simply a family project, it was part of a pattern. Over the previous year, Ethan had been moving money between his business, personal accounts, and entities he controlled. Some of those transfers were documented as temporary advances. Others had no clear explanation. And in several cases, money had moved from accounts connected to our joint finances into his business. I looked at the numbers, then at Naomi. How did I not see this? You trusted him. I shook my head. No, I trusted the person I thought he was. Naomi was quiet. Then she said, "Those are not always the same thing." 3 days later, Margaret called me. I answered. "Hello?" Her voice was cold. "Ethan told me you're stopping construction." "I am." "Why?" "Because I didn't authorize the addition." "That's ridiculous. It is my property. It is our family property." "No." She laughed. "Claire, you've always been difficult." I said nothing. She continued. "Ethan has always taken care of me." "Then he should have told me what he was doing. He knew you would be selfish." That word stayed in my head. Selfish. I had worked weekends. I had paid for the land. I had delayed vacations. I had supported Ethan through his failed business years. I had helped pay household expenses when his company struggled. And now I was selfish because I refused to donate a room in my house to his mother. I said, "Margaret, did you believe you were moving into my house?" Silence. Then she said, "Ethan promised me I would have a place there." "When?" "A long time ago." "How long?" "Before you even bought the last piece of land." I felt a chill. He had promised this before we had even finished purchasing the property. The plan had not started 6 months ago. It had started years earlier. I asked, "Did you know the property was in my name?" "Of course." "And you still expected to move in?" He said marriage meant everything would eventually be shared. I closed my eyes. Marriage does not mean my husband can promise my property to someone else. She hung up. That night, I searched through every document in the folder. I found something I hadn't noticed before, a letter from Ethan to the contractor. It was dated 8 months earlier. The subject line, "Future Family Residence, Margaret Holloway." I read it 3 times. He wrote that his mother would eventually occupy the rear suite indefinitely. Indefinitely. Not for visits, not when needed, indefinitely. Then I found another document, a draft occupancy agreement. It had never been finalized, but in the agreement, Margaret would have permanent access to the suite, separate utility control, use of a private entrance, parking access, and the right to remain in the property even if Ethan and I separated. I stopped reading. My hands went numb. He had planned for his mother to remain in my house even if our marriage ended. That was when something shifted inside of me. I stopped thinking about saving the marriage. I started thinking about protecting my future. I moved my personal savings. I redirected my paycheck. I separated my finances where legally possible. I made copies of every document. I changed my passwords. And I told Naomi everything. She approved. Good. Is this really necessary? Yes. Because he hasn't actually taken the house. Not yet. Those words stayed with me. Not yet. 1 week later, Ethan discovered that I had opened a separate account. He came home furious. "You don't trust me." "No." He looked stunned. "After 21 years? I trusted you enough to let you make decisions without questioning them." He shook his head. "So this is revenge?" "No." "Then what is it?" "Protection." He laughed bitterly. "You've turned this into a war." "No, Ethan." I looked at him. "You started one when you decided my house belonged to your mother." He sat down. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "I was trying to make everyone happy." "No," I shook my head. "You were trying to avoid disappointing your mother." He looked away. "And you were willing to make me pay for that." His eyes became wet. "I love you." "I believe you." "Then why won't you give me another chance?" "Because this isn't one mistake." He looked at me. "It's hundreds of decisions." And I was right. It wasn't the floor plan. It was everything behind the floor plan. Every conversation I wasn't part of. Every promise made using my property. Every dollar moved without my knowledge. Every time Margaret's wishes mattered more than mine. The addition was just the first thing I finally caught. The bank eventually placed a formal hold on additional construction draws. The contractor stopped work. Naomi notified Ethan in writing that no further modifications to the property were authorized. And then we waited. That was the hardest part. Because when you are used to fixing things, waiting feels like weakness. But sometimes, waiting is how you see what people do when they can't control you. Ethan became distant. Margaret became angry. And the financial problems became impossible to hide. Within a month, Ethan admitted that his company could not continue operating at the same level. He had debts he couldn't cover. He had expected future contracts to save him. They didn't. Then I learned why he had been so desperate. The construction business had suffered a major loss on a commercial project. A large client had refused to pay the final balance. Ethan had borrowed to cover payroll, then borrowed again, then moved money from one account to another. Then he convinced himself that the next contract would fix everything, and when it didn't, he started looking for money elsewhere. That's when my house became part of the solution. Not because he wanted to build a beautiful home, because he needed liquidity. And the addition gave him a reason to take more money out of the construction loan. Suddenly, Margaret's suite wasn't just an act of control, it was camouflage. I confronted him with the evidence. How much of the $96,000 was actually for your mother? He stared at the table. I don't know. Yes, you do. He sighed. Some of it was for other project expenses. How much? $20,000. I felt sick. So you use the addition to pull money out of the loan. I was going to replace it. You keep saying that. I was. You didn't. He covered his face with his hands. I was scared. I looked at him. Of losing your business? Yes. Not of losing me. He didn't answer. That answer told me everything. The divorce process began quietly. There was no screaming courtroom scene, no dramatic confrontation, no revenge speech, just paperwork, bank statements, property records, attorney meetings, financial disclosures, and a painful number of questions. Where did this payment go? What was this transfer? Why was this account opened? Who approved this? When? Why? Every question made the marriage smaller, until eventually the only thing left was the truth. Ethan had lied because he was afraid. Margaret had pushed because she believed she deserved access to her home. And I had spent years confusing peace with loyalty. One morning, nearly 6 months after I found the floor plan, I returned to the house. The main structure was complete. The addition had been redesigned. It became a beautiful guest bedroom instead. No kitchenette, no private entrance, no separate living space, just a bedroom for guests. The contractor had credited part of the unused materials. The bank recovered part of the improperly allocated funds. The rest was handled through the settlement. Margaret never moved in. She moved to another state with her sister. Ethan sold his company. The divorce was finalized several months later. I kept the land. I kept the house. And most importantly, I kept my ability to decide what happened next.